This is Speaking from Water, episode 26, and it's a very special episode. I'm your host, Sean Rutke. We have a outdoorsman, a surfer, a lover of the earth, an environmentalist, and a CEO of the largest uh, packaging company in North America. And that's not all. He's also the founder of a New Earth project, which is focused on getting all of our packaging in our system into a sustainable manner and getting it out of our oceans and into a place where they need to be, and that's not in the water. And this podcast is focused on bringing water legends to the forefront. And today we have Wes Carter, a true water legend in that regard. Wes, thank you very much for joining us.
It's great to be with you, man. Thank you for having me.
So recently I saw you were in La Jolla, California. Tell us a little bit about what you were doing there.
Yeah, in Laguna, actually.
Laguna, excuse me.
Yeah, so we were one of the sponsors of the Coast Film Festival in Laguna Beach. And the Thursday, sort of the opening of the festival, they had the first ever Coast Summit. And that summit was all about sustainability. And so it was a full day of panel discussions with people from sort of all walks of life in different areas of our economy, discussing how we as individuals and also as organizations within the supply chain can get really focused on sustainability, how we activate the voices of the elite athletes in the outdoor space, and really work to activate the brands in surfing and in snowboarding and skiing and really all outdoor sport to really lead what I like to call the sustainable revolution. So a big credit to the guys out there who started the Coast Film Festival about wanting to incorporate, environmental ethics into the festival. And my New Earth director, Don Meek, who lives in Laguna, where our New Earth showroom is, really spearheaded the coordination of that summit. So it was great fun, and it's been really great to see the surfing community in particular really rally behind sustainability.
Was there a particular film that stood out to you that you were able to catch?
There was a few films. The new trilogy New Wave, that was directed by Andy McKenzie. We had an affiliation with that film. Actually, a New Earth project helped produce the behind the scenes, the making of that film. So we were really familiar with all they had going on, and really incredible cinematography and a lot of drone footage of surfing from around the world with three incredibly gifted surfers. And so that film was certainly special. And then another a professional skier, a woman named Amy Ingerbretson, presented a film called The Hypocrite, which was really about her realization as an outdoor athlete, that she's out there talking a lot about climate change and the impacts of climate change and what she's seeing in the backcountry. And she's talking a lot about how do we impact pollution and, really presenting all these environmental ethics. But at the same time, she's acknowledging that, it feels a little hypocritical because I'm riding on helicopters and I'm driving snowmobiles in the backcountry, and I've got a pretty significant carbon footprint myself. And it was a film really about where does personal responsibility begin, and also where does it intersect with a supply chain, providing products where it's not just up to individuals to make personal changes. And that's I thought that film was really powerful. It started off a lot of this sort of like, wow, I really feel bad. I really feel like a hypocrite. But the way that the film ended was sort of this realization that, and this is my firm belief as well, that in order to solve these really big problems, it really is not about individual human beings, making these radical changes to the way they operate in the world. It really is about the companies, the companies in the supply chain shifting, and environmental ethics becoming a fundamental part of how all companies go to market, and beginning to provide environmentally friendly, balanced products, materials, services to individuals, so we can all continue to do the things that we love without having such a huge environmental impact. So I really felt like where that film landed is exactly how I feel about how this needs to progress in our world.
And really it goes to the heart of what you're doing, which, Wes, is so impressive, because the more I've dug deep into the story that you come where you come from, where your grandfather started, and then your father took the company, and then where you've taken the reins, is absolutely a phenomenal tale. Can we go there real quick? I'd like for you to kind of give us a homage to your grandfather, who started this company not with the mission of making packaging, but fighting racism. And tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, my grandfather was an amazing guy. He grew up with virtually nothing. In a teeny little town outside of Charlotte. His father was a part-time mechanic. But my grandfather, went to a one-room schoolhouse. And he had along the way a teacher that really believed in him, thought he could be a writer. And to make a long story short, my grandfather was the first kid in his high school to ever go to college in the history of his high school. And he was able to get into the University of North Carolina, where he studied to be a writer. By the time he got out of school, he wanted to start his own newspaper. And so he moved to a small town in southeastern North Carolina called Tabor City, which is just sort of inland of Myrtle Beach and Wilmington. And he started this little weekly newspaper, originally just reporting on tobacco farming news, because that was really the only news that there was in the Southeast during that period of our history. But pretty quickly, my grandfather became aware that the Ku Klux Klan was really active in that community. And my grandfather just left Chapel Hill, where he'd gotten this liberal arts education and was really inspired by a lot of the people that he came into contact with there. And he was also a power of the pen, God and country kind of guy. And he just felt like there was no place in this country for a vigilante group like the Klan enacting their own form of justice on people. And he took it upon himself to fight the Klan with his newspaper. So he wrote scathing, editorials condemning their activities. And it was a pretty harrowing experience for him. They threatened to kill him. They hired a hitman at one point. They threatened to kidnap his children. They threatened all his advertisers. Everyone he knew told him to stop. Everyone was super scared for his personal safety and the safety of his family. But my grandfather never relented, and he really believed he was on a mission that was inspired, by spirit. And the end result was his editorials got picked up by a lot larger newspapers like the Raleigh News and Observer and the Charlotte Observer. And eventually the FBI contacted him and said, "We would like your help to infiltrate the Klan," which is exactly what they did. They were successful in arresting over 300 Klansmen, including the Grand Dragon of the Carolinas Ku Klux Klan. And that really broke their back. They were never the same organization in the Southeast. And my grandfather won a Pulitzer Prize for meritorious public service in 1952. He was the first weekly newspaper to ever win a Pulitzer, and he was 32 years old at the time. So that was really the beginnings of Atlantic. A weekly newspaper winning a Pulitzer for fighting the Klan. We're obviously a much different organization today. We actually still print that little newspaper every week. But the thing I love about my grandfather's story is it really set the tone for our organization. The core values of the organization, the ethics of the organization, were really stamped, right from the very beginning. We've had some people point out to us that today that it's sort of unique that a company that was founded fighting for civil rights during that period of our history is today in the era of climate change and plastic pollution, fighting for environmental rights. So there is, as his grandson, there's some synergies there. I also have to give a nod to my father, Rusty. Rusty's still our CEO today. I'm the president of Atlantic, but my dad really took the company on in the early 70s. And it was because of his vision that we really evolved from this small weekly newspaper and paper supply house to a major, packaging company that we are today. My dad built the company over the next 5 decades into the powerhouse that it is today. And yeah, I like to say, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. And today the work that we're doing is really important. We're working to try to wake the supply chain up, not just us, but with other partners as well. And really say that, the environmental footprint and the impact of the packaging industry has been pretty devastating. And it's time for this industry to really acknowledge that. It wasn't intentional. We didn't intend for this to happen, but it did. And we have to acknowledge that and then make commitments to developing new materials that are more circular, that are more earth friendly, earth digestible, recyclable, because those things have not been a part of packaging development historically. People were not, companies were not developing packaging for recycling. People were not developing packaging for circularity, compostability. But we believe that once we start to move in that direction, that we say, hey, these are fundamentally important parts of packaging development, that we can shift this global plastic pollution crisis pretty significantly. It's one of those global problems that actually I believe is very solvable. And it's hard to say that about a lot of global problems these days.
When did you find your love for the water? Can you put a time on that?
Man, I probably can't actually. I like to say salt water was the backdrop for my life, certainly my youth. I grew up in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, from the time I was 2 or 3 years old. And I just don't ever remember life without the Atlantic Ocean in the background. So I was on a boogie board, when I was a young kid, and a surfboard shortly thereafter, and did a lot of boating and a lot of offshore fishing. And salt water has just been a big part of my life, and continues to be to this day. And so I've got a great passion for the ocean life. And quite honestly, I didn't ever really see how that had anything to do with my career. For most of my early career, my love for the outdoors, and not just, ocean. I've been a lifelong backpacker and hiker, and spent a lot of time in the out west, and, I'm a skier and a snowboarder. And if it's outside, I tend to love to do it, but I never really saw how those passions for the outdoors would intersect with my professional life, until sustainability happened. And I really saw that there was a real opportunity to channel those passions into my professional work, and maybe actually have an impact on a lot of these problems that I was seeing firsthand. As an outdoor person, I was seeing a lot of the impacts of our industry firsthand.
When was that moment where you were in the position you were, and you had the aha, and a new earth was born into your mind?
Yeah, I like to say this too, that it wasn't a strike of lightning. There was not one moment. There was a series of moments over a couple of years. But once I got into my mid 30s, I started taking a lot of surf trips, as we surfers do. Nothing better than piling up with your buddies and, going to an exotic place with great waves and maybe a few less people than your home break. And so I was traveling to, Central America, to the Caribbean. I did a boat trip to Indonesia on my 40th birthday. And more and more, I was seeing a lot of plastic pollution, and I remember noticing that a lot of the things that I was seeing in the water was packaging, and it wasn't all packaging that I sell, but it was a part of the supply chain that we're a part of, we're an integral part of. And I also had read Yvon Chouinard from Patagonia, his book, Let My People Go Surfing. and he talks a lot about, hey, I always assumed I would retire early and move to the South Pacific and just live the good life. And he said, but I recognize that all the places that I love to go were being decimated by pollution and climate change. And he said, I want to take this organization that I built and utilize it for something really good for the world. That's more important than my retirement. Now I'm a long way from retirement age, but I remember thinking like that's a remarkable thing that this man has chosen to do. And I saw that Atlantic had a similar, maybe even more impactful opportunity because of how integrated we were in all these different areas of the supply chain. I mean, we support companies in every single manufacturing vertical, from food, beverage, building products, e-commerce, medical, automotive, aerospace. I mean, you name it, anybody making anything. So I was like, well, if we can help these large consumer products companies and retail brands make these transitions, maybe have a global impact. And I think that probably was the biggest strike of lightning moment, is realizing that we have a seat at the table with the largest consumer products companies in the world. They already trust us with their packaging needs. And if we can start to promote sustainable packaging and not only promote it, but help facilitate the transition by making it economical, because that always is the biggest barrier, is like, how do you make these changes in a way that is economically viable for the brands? And ultimately the consumers, because a lot of the costs are going to get passed along to consumers. And we certainly don't want that. So I just saw a really interesting, intriguing role for our company to play. And as that vision continued to take shape, I started talking about it a lot publicly, that our industry needs to do this. We've got to wake up. I felt like our industry had an intentional blind spot for a long time, where the plastic pollution crisis was being created by the supply chain that we were all a part of, and no one was talking about it. No one was doing anything about it. It was just sort of over here in the corner. And I felt like the first thing we had to do was really acknowledge that problem and then commit to making those changes. And so, and you asked about a New Earth project. I mean, like I said, I'd gotten real public in our industry in particular, and on social media like LinkedIn, talking about sustainability, and sustainable packaging had to be a priority for everyone in the packaging. And there was a guy that I got connected to who was in the marketing business, and he said, "Hey man, I have always thought that the surf industry and surf culture has a radical level of influence, and I was like, yeah, you're probably right. I mean, if I look back over my entire life, even since like the 70s and 80s, like what phenomenon culturally has had the biggest impact on the way people dress and the way people talk and the things people, like, you can argue surfing is, had a pretty big impact. And he's like, I really think sustainability and surfing go hand in hand. And I know you're a surfer. And he said, early in my career, I worked at Hurley back in the 90s, and I worked with a guy named Peter King, who's now a photographer in Hawaii. And he's been really wanting to make a documentary series about surfing with a purpose. And he's like, I think you guys are really likely partners. I think there's a partnership opportunity here. So I was intrigued enough about that, Peter and I hopped on a phone call on the 26th of December of 2020. And we said, what if we try to inspire the surfing industry, the brands in surfing, to lead the sustainable revolution? We'll help them create all these sustainable packaging, whether for apparel or surfboards or other types of gear. We'll create documentary series telling these really beautiful stories of this transition, of this big shift. We'll invite the pro surfers, the elite athletes, to really be our voices, to help activate it. We'll get to hear their stories from their travels all over the world. And that was the idea. And the surf community has really embraced it, especially the professional surfers, the Kai Lennies and the Koa Smiths and the Carissa Moores and all the Kelly Slater, all the people that we've worked with over the last few years have just really embraced that surfers are canaries of the oceans, ambassadors for the oceans, and we have a responsibility to take that passion and channel it in the direction of a healthier supply chain. And there's just a unique opportunity where they could get connected to a company like Atlantic that actually had the opportunity to have an impact. And so that was sort of the birth of a New Earth project. People ask me, where did that name come from? I just finished reading Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth, which I highly recommend. And so that book had a huge impact on me. It's, all about how to recreate a more beautiful world through personal healing and collective healing. And I felt like that's what this really was. This is about a big collective healing that has to happen in our world, that I believe, human beings collaborating together can absolutely do.
Well, it's so beautiful, and it seems like there's like three parts to it: education, legislation, and the practical application. And the practical application part of it is really, I believe, where you specialize in. And I'm looking at on the website for all the different products that you've created, and they all have this fiber-based system incorporated into it. So it's anti-plastic, and it's not really a recycling mission, but more of a mission where the packaging biodegrades over time. Do I have that right?
Well, I mean, yes, sort of. There's a little more nuance than that, but so we sell packaging into different areas of the supply chain. So we sell a lot of packaging that is just being utilized between businesses, like businesses shipping big pallets of goods from a manufacturing operation to a distribution center where the packaging is removed. In that lane, recycling and creating closed loops is a lot easier. It has to be done. But we don't see nearly as much leakage in B2B packaging. So where we identified where we see a lot of leakage is in business to consumer packaging. It's the stuff that ends up at your house. It's the stuff that gets shipped to you via e-commerce, or it's the packaging that you go to the grocery store and bring home, or a big box store and bring home. And, in that lane, there's a lot of single-use plastic. Single-use plastic, flexible packaging, or flexible plastic like bags are typically not curbside recyclable. And if they do end up in the environment, they don't break down, and we know that in the direct-to-consumer lane, about 7 to 8% of all packaging that ends up at your house ends up in the environment. So that was where we really tried to focus on fiber-based packaging, as you just mentioned, for two reasons primarily. In fiber-based packaging, which is paper packaging primarily in this country, but there's other types of fiber, hemp fiber as an example, or grass fiber, and so you're seeing more and more products come to market. Mycelium, which is like mushroom fiber, there's more and more of that coming to market. But fiber, we recycle really well in this country. So every blue bin in America, you can put paper in it, because there's a huge demand by the paper industry for that recycled fiber. So that's the biggest part, is we want to send stuff to your house that we already have the built-in infrastructure for recycling, and paper checks every box. The other thing is, if it's paper or fiber-based, if it ends up in the environment in 8 to 12 weeks, it's going to break down, in almost any environment. And so that's pretty simple to me. We recycle fiber really well in this country, and we know some of it is going to end up in the environment. And at least if it does, it's a natural product that's going to be, quote, earth digestible is the word that we like to use. So that's why we really leaned into fiber-based packaging in the direct-to-consumer route. Now, there are other plastic packaging products that we think are really viable and good, a lot in B2B packaging, where we don't necessarily want to get out of plastic, because there are certain types of plastic that are really, really efficient, but we want to be sure that we're collecting that stuff and having it recycled. So ultimately, whether it's direct to consumer or between businesses, what we're really trying to produce is circularity. We want to go from a linear form of an economy where we pull resources from the ground, we produce a product that produces waste, and we put it back in the ground. That's very linear. In circularity, you begin to look at all the waste that you produce as a resource that can be utilized again. So we're just trying to create circularity. But again, as it relates to direct-to-consumer packaging, my perspective is that we don't recycle plastic very well in this country, and we're a long way from ever recycling it very well. And we have to acknowledge that if it's direct-to-consumer, you're always going to have leakage into the environment. It's just a reality. It's going to happen. And so in every application that we can, we should be trying to transition to products that will break down in the environment. The biggest challenge in that arena is food packaging by far, because food packaging, so much food's packaged in plastic for food safety reasons, for shelf life reasons. And so over the next, whatever decade or more, that's where you'll see a lot of innovation in packaging is in food packaging, because that's going to be a heck of a challenge.
And where on the spectrum do you think we're falling right now? Are we like a quarter of the way there? Are we halfway there as far as meeting the goals that you see us needing to meet?
I've never been asked that question. It's a good one. I would say this: in what I call protective packaging. So when you order something from a .com, from an e-commerce company, the biggest one starts with an A that we all know. The packaging that goes inside the box, the protective packaging to keep the products from shifting around, that has traditionally been things like air pillows, bubble wrap, polystyrene foam, all of that stuff is not curbside recyclable. And if it ends up in the environment, it's bad news. And we have already transitioned some really large companies away from all of that type of packaging to fiber-based protective packaging. Williams-Sonoma being one of the biggest. Williams-Sonoma, they're in our sustainability report. We were able to eliminate close to 400,000 pounds of single-use plastic annually for them. And so now all of their products come in fiber-based packaging. And so to me, if a brand as large as Williams-Sonoma can do it and is diversified, so can anybody else. So to me, that's the low-hanging fruit. Those are not terribly technical applications. You're just trying to protect products from getting broken in shipping. So parcel shipping, I think we're 2% of the way there, but I think in 3 to 5 years, we can be 90% of the way there with a little will. On the food packaging side, we're barely scratching the surface. We got a long way to go. So I think it really does depend on the specific applications that we're talking about. And then you've also got beverage, which is a huge vertical in and of itself, single-use beverage containers, and then the food service side too. Takeaway, to go carriers and things like that. So there's a lot of movement in that direction as well. I would say in the food carrier world, the takeout, carrier world, maybe we're 20% of the way there, but again, I think I'd probably look at it more in terms of technology. We have the technology and protective packaging for parcels to make the shift. We have the technology in food service for the most part to make the shift. We don't have the technology in direct food contact, for things like vegetables and raw protein like beef and chicken and pork. Like those are the applications that have the most work.
And out of the two ways to get there, I see it there being the gas as the money. If it's cost effective, then you can get it there. And then there's the legal. If laws are passed onto companies, do you view a two-pronged approach there, or do you see like one more powerful as the other?
Ultimately, the thing I think that is the most powerful is consumer demand. Like, let's use the surfing community as an example. Like, if everyone in surfing said, I'm not going to shop with brands anymore that ship single-use plastic to me. Like I'm not going to buy a surfboard if the company I'm buying it for is going to wrap it in single-use plastic. I'm only going to shop with companies like Pazel or Album, like some of our customers who have made these shifts. Stewart is another one, and you start rewarding the companies that are making the investments in ethical packaging. That I think has the opportunity to make the biggest shift. And it goes for not just in surfing, for and young people today, millennials in particular, studies show that they value sustainability more than brand, and so whether the brands are acknowledging it or not, they are being judged ethically on their packaging every single day. And that's not going to change. That's only going to grow. And I think that has the opportunity to have the biggest impact. Nothing will shift a way a company operates more than consumer demand. I will say, though, on top of that, legislation, I think, plays a pretty key part. Legislation is almost like an accelerator. And we need an accelerator. We need a few accelerators. And I think that EPR legislation, which stands for Extended Producer Responsibility, it's popular all over the world. It's popular in Canada, all over Europe and Australia, and it's beginning to take hold here. The most significant EPR law passed in California last year, SB 54. It's not in effect yet. The law is passed, but the law doesn't really go into effect probably until 2026. And basically what that law will do is it will put fees on the most problematic packaging, the stuff that's the least recyclable, that's the most likely to end up in the environment. And in many cases, it's also, in many cases, it's also the cheapest. And so one of the reasons some of this real problematic packaging continues to be utilized is because it's so inexpensive, and you can't blame brands for that. They're trying to produce products at the most competitive number out there. And, if they can package something effectively in a really inexpensive packaging, they're going to tend to do that. But EPR says we're going to put fees on that type of packaging if it's environmentally problematic, and it sort of evens the playing field. So some of these alternatives that historically have been more expensive, all of a sudden, will look more competitive because of the fee structures that are being placed on single-use plastic. So I think done well and intelligently, EPR can be a great lever to pull. But packaging super complex. It's a very diverse, different applications, different industries, and so how well EPR is legislated and how well the eco-modulated fees are constructed, I think will have a huge impact on how successful EPR can be. But it's one of the reasons that we're working really hard to have a seat at the table with the legislatures that are implementing EPR to be sure that they're getting a lot of impact from packaging professionals to understand, where the low-hanging fruit is and where the potential pitfalls can be. But no, I love your question. I mean, ultimately, it's an all hands on deck. We need consumer demand. We need the packaging supply chain innovating more sustainable packaging every single day. And we also need legislation supporting that transition.
Are you focusing on a state level or a federal level with these ambitions?
Both. I mean, right now, most of the legislation is at the state level. So, Maine has EPR laws, Colorado has EPR laws, Oregon has EPR laws. It's typically more of your blue states, but that's starting to change. Even North Carolina has debated EPR, Texas has debated EPR, Maryland just passed an EPR law. So, I mean, it is starting to change. What I like to say is plastic pollution might be one of the only issues in America that's pretty nonpartisan. There's not a lot of politicians promoting more plastic in the ocean. It's one of the reasons I actually think this is a great issue to really rally around. It's something that we can all agree that we need to fix. We have different strategies for fixing it, but at least there's a center point that says everyone agrees that plastic pollution is a problem and we need to do something about it. But most of the EPR laws are at the state level right now. I am meeting with a lot of federal politicians as well. I do believe you are going to need to harmonize EPR across the country. The last thing we want is the EPR law in North Carolina being radically different than the one in California, being different than the one in Texas, being different than the one in Illinois. It becomes impossible for consumer products and retail companies to manage all these different fees and all these different geographies. Because, in many cases, they're shipping from one massive distribution center to half the country, and so we need a harmonized EPR structure across the entire United States. But we're a pretty good ways from that happening. But I do believe that's where we'll have to go eventually.
Well, it seems you're the man to make this happen. Is there a political future in your future? Do you see?
That's not on my current radar. It's been suggested a few times, but no, I'm really focused on the mission that we have at hand at Atlantic. I love this organization. This organization has been, a part of the fiber of my family for generations now. And I feel like that the work that we're doing inside the supply chain is critically important. I mean, I actually believe, we're being integrated in the supply chain where we're connected to the producers of packaging, we're connected to the users of packaging, we're developing packaging. We've got this packaging solution center in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we're verifying and testing and developing new sustainable packaging. Like, that's the area that I feel like currently I can have the greatest impact. And if one day that changes and I feel like I can have a greater impact doing something else, maybe I'll consider it. But right now, I really believe that where we sit today and the work that we're trying to do is the best chance that we have as a country of solving this problem here, and we also have to solve it abroad as well. So, but yeah.
So I have we have a mutual friend, Ben Bourgeois, and over the weekend, I was at a party and he was there, and I told him we were going to have this conversation. I said, what's one question you would want to ask Wes? And he thought deeply. I mean, for a little over a minute, and he said, ask Wes, how did he raise his level of consciousness, and how's that going? So I have no backstory for this. I didn't ask him to elaborate, but I wanted to put that down.
First of all, I'm a huge Ben Bourgeois fan. That is a gem of a human being. Everyone who knows Ben is better for knowing him. No, it doesn't surprise me that Ben asked that question, because that's the kind of thing he and I talk about quite a lot. I ultimately believe that healing the planet is completely interlocked with healing human beings. I think in order for us to really solve these big global problems, there is a level of inner healing, spiritual healing that has to happen, because ultimately for me, a lot of these realizations about my roles and responsibilities in fixing this problem came from deep spiritual work and beginning to understand that all life is sacred, and I believe the fundamental meaning of life is life. Like, life is the meaning of life. And as intelligent beings on this planet, we have a God-given responsibility to be great stewards of this planet, not to conquer it. We're not here. Manifest destiny is not the deal. This is about being in harmony with life. This is about being in balance with life. And I learned that through a lot of indigenous wisdom, and working in those indigenous communities with indigenous medicines. That expanded my consciousness and allowed me to better understand my role in what I like to call the ecology of souls, I truly believe part of the human story is waking up to the sacredness of life and understanding that we must save ourselves. I think that is part of the human story, is saving ourselves, using our brilliant minds to innovate our way out of these global problems to create better harmony for all living things on this planet. People ask me all the time, what can I do to contribute? I want to be a part of this movement. I'm like, work on yourself first and foremost, like commit deeply to the personal work. And as you do this personal work around your own personal healing, things like purpose, activation, like understanding what your unique role is, those things become more and more obvious. And I certainly think Ben can attest to that. That story's been true for him. But yeah, ultimately we talk a lot about, in order to solve these big global problems, we have to raise our level of consciousness beyond profit and loss. It has to be a much more collaborative, harmonious, balanced perspective on what it means to be a human being. And one of the things I say a lot in the business, in the rooms of business that I, spend a lot of time in is, life has to have a seat at the table. Life has to have a seat at our negotiating table. When we are discussing whatever it may be, if it is going to impact, if human activities are going to impact life in a negative way, then we should really take a pause. Really take a pause, because I don't think any of us want to live in a world where we no longer have whales, or we no longer have elephants, like, who wants to live in that world? But we're headed there, and we have to wake up to our roles and responsibilities as intelligent beings and stewards of all other life on this planet, and commit to making the changes that need to be made. So, long answer to your question, but maybe Ben would approve of that answer.
Well, as a super successful leader of a company that does very well as a person with strong convictions, I'm sure on a daily basis you have a conflict arise. How do you handle the conflict, and do you ever cede to one side or the other?
Yeah, there's some conflict. I get real quiet, I think one of the things I've learned is when conflict arises, if I don't have the right answer is to wait. Like I've really had to learn to create space for the really difficult decisions. Certainly there are times where you got to make a spur of the moment decision, and that's critical as well. But I found, in most areas of life, it's not nearly as urgent as we think it may be. And if you give things a little breathing room, you tend to make better decisions. But certainly, in the work that we're doing, we are pushing up against the way things have always been done, and when you push up against the way things have always been done, there are always going to be forces out there that don't want to upset the apple cart, and so what we've tried to focus on is the positive, as opposed to pointing fingers and saying, this is so bad the way we've done this, and, shame on this company and shame on that company. And I think that's sort of a ridiculous way to operate and not very productive. What I think is a lot more productive is to say, let's create new products, new packaging products that are awesome, that are sexy, that are super appealing for the brands, that are super engaging for the customers. It's like when we designed that S3 Pro shipping system for surfboards, it wasn't just about a fiber-based curbside recyclable shipping system. We wanted it to be better. We wanted to protect the surfboard better. We wanted it to present it better to the customer. We wanted to reduce the dimensional weight so it was cheaper to ship. We wanted to make it quicker to ship for the packers, for the folks packing surfboards. So we incorporated all those different things, and we created a shipping system that is 100% curbside recyclable, 100% plastic free, and it also is better in every possible way than the old way of doing it. And so to me, that is actually the answer. Innovation, create new products that are better and, more appealing to consumers, market the packaging as part of the environmental ethics of your brand. And then the sustainable revolution doesn't become something that we have to do. It becomes a celebration. It becomes our generation's moon landing. The technology and innovation, I like to say, we just have to create technology in the direction of life. Life, I like to call it life affirming technology, and to me, that's exciting, that's engaging, and so that's what we talk about. We don't get too hung up in the, where we've been, and, it's more about where we're going. And so I think when you bring the energy of innovation, and the energy of developing innovations in the direction of life, that creates a certain momentum that's powerful and engaging for people.
Well, I know you have a hard stop in a few minutes, and I have two last questions. One's a physical and one's a metaphysical. Let's go with the physical first. I've been following you on the Instagram. You're very healthy. You're health conscious. What does a day in the life of Wes Carter look like as far as staying healthy?
I will say this. I think health is fundamental to everything. I mean, ultimately, what we're talking about with sustainability is creating a healthier supply chain, and I like to say, I think that sustainability is an outer reflection of an inner commitment to health and wellness. So when, a lot of my awakening around the roles and responsibilities of Atlantic and how to begin to incorporate life into our decision making around the products that we were developing, it all started with a personal commitment to health and wellness, like I talked about earlier. And so that's remained pretty fundamental for me. And it's not real complicated, but I get up, early in the morning, before the sun comes up, where I have at least an hour of just time by myself. And I meditate most mornings. Meditation and prayer are a big part of how I start my day. It sets the tone for my day. It also allows me to, connect with something greater. Early in the morning is a really good time to do that. Your mind's so much quieter in the morning. So that morning time is really sacred for me. And then, I incorporate a lot of different types of physical fitness. I lift heavy twice a week. I think for all human beings, lifting heavy is really important just to overall health and wellness and being anti-fragile. And then I try to incorporate yoga. I did yoga this morning. So I used to do it a lot more, but at least once a week now I'm in a yoga studio. And then, just stay focused on a high protein diet. Eat a lot of fruit, eat a lot of high quality protein, try to stay away from sugar and carbs. And then the other secret, and this is the biggest one, is just spend a ton of time outside. I mean, outside, like feet in the river, feet on the dirt, I prioritize my time outside because it's honestly where I get all my inspiration. It's where all the ideas happen, and I think it's important that people understand when you're trying to create, that's the place to gain inspiration. Like I don't create much from sitting in front of a computer screen, like that's not a inspiring, place for me. So I try to prioritize time outside, breathing fresh air, time with my family, all those kind of things. But yeah, clean water, clean air, family, friends, and stay away from the things that lower your vibration. Stay away from alcohol, stay away from hard drugs. All that stuff is just ultimately going to take you to a place that you don't want to go.
Great advice for everyone listening. So the heart of this show is aesthetics of water, the water and what they give to us visually. What is your favorite kind of water to be in as far as the aesthetics go? Thinking wind, thinking light.
Oh man. Well, I like to be in salt water. I like to be in fresh water too, but man, if I'm pretty partial to salt water, and I think to me, there's nothing more special than being somewhere tropical where you're dropping in on a pretty large wave and there's white sand below and super clear water, and like you can literally see through the wave. And you get a lot of that in the Caribbean and in Central America, and certainly, in places like the South Pacific. But that sort of crystal clear, see through the water as you're dropping in on the wave is about as good as it gets. So I think that would be my top pick.
Follow up to that. Where would you go if you could just hop out that door where you are right now? I believe in South Carolina, probably, and you can go anywhere on the planet and catch that wave. Where would that wave be?
The Mentawais.
Do I have this right? Is that where this all started? I've been doing my research pretty well with you, and it seems like you had a lot happen there mentally.
Yeah, that was a pilgrimage of sorts, I went for my 40th birthday, which is a pretty big marker. And my brother went with me, and he's 10 years younger than me. So his birthday and mine are actually pretty close together. So I was turning 40 and he was turning 30. And, we're pretty average surfers. So going all the way to Indonesia was a lot of trip for us. But yeah, that was a sacred few weeks, like it was, arguably the most beautiful place I've ever been to surf, certainly. incredible quality of waves. We stayed on a boat the whole time, so we were moving around a lot. It was just no cell phones that work there, so you're pretty disconnected from the world. And it was also the place where I saw a lot of plastic pollution, and it was like, damn, like this is literally like the most amazing place I've ever been to surf. It is spectacularly beautiful, and there's really not any people here. Like there's no industry here, but there's plastic pollution everywhere. It's coming from other places and it's polluting these beautiful places. And I think that pilgrimage over there to surf the best waves in the world, but also see the other dark side, the juxtaposition of the beauty and the ugliness, stuck with me, the realization that if we don't make these commitments, that places like that will be ruined. Many places like that have been ruined. And we have it in our power to fix it, but it has to happen. It has to be a systematic change. It's not going to be changed by individuals. And I'm all about individual change. And man, if you can use a reusable water bottle, you absolutely should. If you can limit single-use plastic and use reusable products, you absolutely should. But ultimately, the supply chain has to provide materials, products, packaging to consumers that are easy to recycle, that break down if they end up in the environment. It's on the companies. And I also think it's on the companies to support conservation worldwide. I think conservation has to become a more fundamental part of all of our, sustainability efforts as organizations. And it's why we support at Atlantic a lot of, organizations like the Surfrider Foundation, like Wild Aid, like Space for Giants. And locally here, I work with the Low Country Land Trust and the Greenheart Project. We do a lot of philanthropic work around sustainability and conservation, because I think that has to be fundamental as well. We've got to fix the problem. We got to turn off the tap, but then we've also got to protect all these vulnerable areas and allow these vulnerable areas to recover. And conservation and stewardship is how we do that. So we're certainly trying to model that at Atlantic.
Incredibly inspiring. And we have 60 seconds before you have to leave. And I finish all the podcast with the question, what's the meaning of life? You've touched on that, but I'd like to bring it up one more time. Wes Carter, what is the meaning of life?
I believe that life is the meaning of life. I truly believe that we are walking through the miracle every single day, and I actually believe a big part of the spiritual journey and a spiritual awakening is awakening to the beauty that is all around you, the consciousness that is all around you. That's certainly been the journey for me, understanding that all life is sacred, and the world around you has tremendous gifts, and it's just a matter of raising your consciousness and your vibration enough to be able to hear the subtle tones and the subtle messages that, I believe God is whispering to you all the time through the miracle that is life. And I think, human beings we get too in our heads. We try to think that it's something way more complicated than that. But I ultimately think that the meaning of life is life. And I believe that the way that we access that is through ourselves, like ultimately, like trying to be the absolute best version of you. Not trying to be anybody else, just working on expressing the gifts that you were given to express in the fullest way that you possibly can. So it's worked for me so far, and I've watched it work for a lot of other people as well. And so that's the path.
Wes, your mission is noble. Thank you for doing what you're doing. And thank you very much for joining us on this episode 26 of Speaking from Water. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I know you're going to be motivating people from time to come as they listen to this in the future.
Well, thank you, my friend. I really appreciate you having me, and a big shout out to all your listeners. And if anybody wants to learn more, you can follow me on Instagram at Wes M. Carter, also at A New Earth Project. And then you can visit our website as well, anewearthproject.com. I will plug this last little piece. We've got the second season of our documentary series, Journey to a New Earth, that will be coming out in early February on Amazon Prime. So keep an eye out for that. I'm sure we'll announce it online as well. But some really cool stories. We're working with Burton Snowboards a lot in season 2 and helping them with their sustainability initiatives. So from sea to snow.
Well, just one final note, all your media that you're producing is just so highly fine-tuned. I encourage everyone to go check it out. Very inspiring, and it really dives deep on a very visually artistic level. Everything Wes has been touching on today with the best pro athletes in the world, Kai Lenny, Kelly Slater, and of course the great Ben Bourgeois. I've been extremely just in awe leading up to this podcast. So thank you again, Wes, again so much. And all these links will be below in the description. And I hope you like and subscribe to this podcast, Speaking from Water. With that said, I am your host, Sean Rutke. Wes, I hope you have a great day. I hope your family has a very Merry Christmas. Your wife and 2 lovely children. Respect.
Thank you, brother. Be well.
Have a great day.